How's it going?
It's okay. Where do we want to just say the basic, like what it is? Because I feel like that's
Maybe
sort
the
of
band,
yeah.
if that's okay. Before we had a Google Calendar, this was once the calendar that we used to kind of organize ourselves.
A print shop before we had a working nice bathtub.
That table was the first table that we had as a print shop. The light table was built pretty early on. This whole table section came from a mill in Fall River. I used to work there, and my boss had access to clearing out a space and was like, do you want a bunch of tables? And I went with him, and I didn't actually even have any rope to tie it onto the top of my car with, so I brought it here tied to the top of my car with extension cords, because that was a wild time. And then we wired it up so that there's this section here is an exposure table. So if you lift that up, that's our screen.
That's where you can expose. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then RISD donated the letterpress in like, what, 2000?
I think that was 4. No, I think, the letterpress. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Whoa.
So this is what we call the big room.
Or the ballroom.
Or the ballroom. When we first started the space, we had a lot of shows and community events in this room, just because there weren't a lot of spaces that could do that. And that was sort of also the subculture that we were coming out of, was very music oriented and DIY, kind of performance oriented. So that was a lot of what our focus was for the first couple of years. That became problematic, like after the Station nightclub fire, as there started to be a crackdown on more informal performance spaces. So we really shifted things over after that and decided to focus on building out spaces for people to be able to work on their personal projects.
And the idea is that people can pull out and build large things in the center of the space, but then people can then shrink back up and close up their bay.
Everyone who's an artist in residence here has a space. We also do have 2 spots for artists in residence at the Wedding Cake House.
I think that a lot of the artists who have gravitated to Dirt Palace work in many different media. So someone could be someone who works in sound, but also does comics, who also is a painter, who also might build sculptural objects or do installations. So generally, a lot of the artists here have worked in many different media.
So a lot of the artists in residence are musicians, since we, as you can hear, have a practice space. People who do printmaking or zines or comics. And there used to be a lot of filmmakers, and I'll show you our ancient filmmaking gear room. So this is the kind of room of ancient film, video, and animation equipment.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a steam back, and again, a lot of this stuff came when schools were phasing out those technologies. So,
Have you had folks edit film here?
yeah, especially in the early days, there were a lot of folks who were working in film, and every once in a while, someone comes just specifically to do a project on film because we have that resource. And so this is an animation downshitter.
That's an animation
you have
table.
2 lights go here, and it originally was controlled by that like little Mac Classic computer, but we just do it by hand.
This is incredible.
I'm also gonna help us with some water. Whenever you're ready, PD.
Yeah. So the Dirt Palace was founded in 2000 in this building, which had once been an abandoned library. And it was really formed out of an experiment of what would happen when 7 feminist artists get together and share space. How that is functionally is that there's 7 artists here at any given point in time who live and work here. The upper floor, which is where we are now, is a shared living space, kind of like just a large shared apartment.
You know, one thing that might be, I think, is good to add, because I think it is an important part of our trajectory, is we started out as a space that was only women. You know, that was 21 years ago, and I think that kind of having a more separatist space made a lot of sense for us at the time. A lot of us had been part of cultures where, women were would pick up a power tool and be told like, no, I'm going to do that. And a lot of it was about coming together to learn a lot of these hands-on trades. The world changed, and it felt really important to us to change with it. We've been through a time when like so many ideas about gender and sexuality have changed so much, and that's been incredible.
We kind of always had people who were in like different states of how they were thinking about their gender, but we didn't actually have the language that we were using was actually not up to date with like the actuality maybe of like who had been here.
We describe ourselves as a feminist space, and we've had people live here who are cis men, who are trans, both men and women, cis women. When I look or think about the kind of spaces or projects that feel the most stuck to me, it is places that haven't been able to evolve and grow and change their minds about things and say like, hey, this isn't what we want to be doing anymore. So,
part of being at the Dirt Palace is we meet once a week together to share a meal and have a meeting and talk about anything from the dishes or to what we would like to curate together as an exhibition, to upcoming plans that people have just in their day-to-day lives. And then we also once a month come together and work on the space for 8 hours, which we call a work day, as a way of like working together. And in the early days, a lot of it was to like learn certain trades and how to be building things with our hands. But then also we got a great gift, I think, from one of the early members, Jo Deary, who then, when she was leaving, she brought up this idea of what we now call a summit, which is once a year we get together and we talk big picture, like what's working, what isn't working, what would people like to see happen in the space, how we had the ability to change and adapt over the years through this idea of the summit that we have built in a structure to be rethinking and changing and adapting and thinking about what works and what doesn't work. And I think that has been part of how the space has stayed able to keep functioning and be sustainable and how we think about what the project is.
Kind of core to the vision has been experimentation, and the sense that part of what the project is not knowing and kind of learning as we collaborate. And that collaboration is in a lot of ways rooted in just what it is to like wake up and have, go to make a cup of coffee and sort of incidentally run into people. It's really very, focused on the informality of kind of what happens when you're in proximity to other people, right? Because so often artists are spending so much time by themselves. Like so many of the things that we do to kind of further our craft and our ideas and visions are really isolating and really solitary. And so there to be a way to kind of have these informal connective threads, to have those social connections that are also really important.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what influences you had at the beginning? What did you know 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Nothing.
True, we knew nothing. We knew nothing, but we were kind of coming out of a space of punk, and I think punk has, is related to a collective sensibility, an understanding that there is like a deep history of people wanting to kind of collectivize or to come together, and ways of doing that. And artist and creativity is being kind of core to some of those processes. So, so those were some of the things we were like looking at. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and Fort Thunder was, a really exciting moment, and a lot of like, predominantly guys coming together to do interesting and exciting things. And I think that like it's really important and really influential, and also just really on like a friendship level, I think people who were like supportive and in our worlds very much in the early days.
We were really thinking about what could be sustainable over a longer term, and I think that's something that a lot of the spaces that we were so inspired by, the way that people built those spaces was so fantastical but also dangerous. People were building their rooms where you might have to climb through a tunnel made out of paper mache to actually enter the room. And, I think that holds like a very special place in our heart, but also like thinking about what what could we do, or what would be safe, and like what could we think about long term in terms of sustainability, while being inspired by these super ephemeral and beautiful spaces.